we've sort of designed this whole session based on the questions that we've heard from you through the registration link or through other sources. So hopefully most of your questions will be answered, but if anything is not answered, there is an open Q&A session where you can ask us those questions, right? So essentially, we're gonna I want to quickly take you through the FAQ, the frequently asked questions, just to sort of give you an idea of what are the kind of questions that we're getting, and you may be able to sort of relate with it. Then we're going to sort of talk about the challenge, the main aspects, the focus areas, some terminologies that we've used, even the name of the challenge for that matter. Then we are talking about the eligibility, the timeline, and then the biggest part of it all, what's a strong application, right? So I think a lot of you have asked us that, so we're going to spend some time on it. June is going to show you some examples, and then we're going to transition into an open Q&A. So maybe let's go to the FAQs and sort of see what kind of questions that we are hearing. I think, as I said, people, we get messages asking, for pointers or examples of what a strong application is. I think some of you also say, okay, what is all this about? What is this program about, right? And where can I learn more about this? I think interactions like this are an opportunity. Hopefully, we'll have more of this in the future. And obviously, we have our website and everything. And I think some other questions like, okay, what's the scale of maturity of my solution? Or what is the process? How do I even go about submitting the solution, right? So no question is basic. So that's the idea. And I think we also get questions like, okay, I mean, we are living in a world where virtual organizations are quite common. So, okay, you have these eligible countries, but my organization is fully online. Okay, how does that work, right? So we're going to answer that, and obviously, we're also going to talk about what is the situation if you're not in corporate, among other things, right? So let's start with talking about the challenge, right? The challenge is called the Green Changemakers Challenge. We are doing this challenge in partnership with HSBC. This is the third year in which we are partnering with them. The last year's challenge was called the Green Skills. I think this year we've evolved from there to for it to be more about change making and how it is activating other people. So essentially, the core of the challenge is about how you can not only deliver solutions that are helping take climate action, but how are you helping other people to do that, right? It's like that, we call it the multiplier effect or the activation effect. So that's the core of the challenge. And our hypothesis is that if you're able to do that, we'll be able to see a world where every single person can contribute, right? June, can you go to the next one? So what is this Green Changemaker? I think at least we believe that we sort of coined this term as part of the challenge. I mean, but I'm sure we could be totally wrong about it. But I think at least how do we define it? I think a Green Changemaker is anyone who recognizes humanity's role within nature. So it's like we don't see it as humanity versus nature or humanity and nature. It's like humanity within nature. And they're able to focus on not just green and sustainable solutions, but also solutions that go beyond that are regenerative, and eventually lead to a place where nobody gets left behind, right? So that is the core of how we define green change making. And as you will continue to see, a lot of our criteria and eligibility, and also the way we define certain aspects talks to these things, right? One is equity, so that how people don't get left behind, and second, reframing how we see ourselves in the context of nature. We can, and June, you want to move on? Yeah. Who are we looking for, right? So we're looking for three types of people. I think the first type, the first type is people who are creating inclusive pathways, right? What does that mean? I think there are people in the world who get more affected by climate change than others. but how can they also become part of the solution? Can they contribute to the solution? So making it inclusive so that people who are being most affected by climate change also become part of the solution, right? And the next one is people who are or people or solutions that are focusing on data and information. So in the sense that I think because we consume so much information about so many things, right? So how does information around climate change or green change making, as we just saw the definition, how can these stories inspire other people to take action, right? I read this and I'm like, oh yes, I want to go do that, right? I want to be a part of this. So that's the second type of people that we're looking for. Again, these categories are not mutually exclusive, right? Because you could be doing all three, or you could be doing a couple, or you could just be doing one as well, right? The last one is creating structures of support for existing solutions. So I think when it comes to innovation, generally speaking, the newness of it is generally appreciated. But it's like if I take a solution and then apply it to a new context or a new region, it's like it doesn't seem that interesting generally, right? But there is a lot of value to be doing that. How do you take existing solutions and one, put them in new areas, and also how do you sort of support the growth and scale of the solutions in that context, right? So one is creating pathways for people to become a part, especially people most affected by it. Second, using stories to spark inspiration. And third, using existing solutions and scaling them to new contexts, right? So these are the three different kinds of change makers that we envision, and you could be doing one or more of this, right? I think we are going on to eligibility. This is an interesting one, and I'm sure a lot of you have questions about why these 34 countries and all of that. So anyway, I'll start with the list of countries. So as you may have already seen, we are accepting applications from 34 countries. And what does this country mean in this context, right? So either you or your initiative has a presence there, either as an incorporation or you're doing work there, right? So I think that is what we mean. And why these 34 countries? I think these are 34 countries where either Ashoka or HSBC is present. So ideally, we want to be able to engage people much more closely. And if we or our community is not present in that country, it makes it much harder for us to do that. The second one is we are focusing mainly on early and mid-stage ventures, essentially those ventures that are less than 6 years old in terms of operations or profitability, right? So essentially, if you've been running your organization for like 10 years, you may not be eligible. You are not eligible for this challenge. And in terms of the maturity and scale, I think we are looking at least a pilot project in which you've shown some kind of a proof of concept or prototype. It's like even if it's like one person who's used it and it's like, okay, that you can see something that's happening. So that's the prototype. A pilot is okay, like you've probably done it with a smaller set of people, and then you have other type of solutions. But essentially, we're looking at solutions that at least have a proof of concept or a prototype, and anything above that is great, right? So if you put these two together, essentially we're looking at young ventures, people who've just started out in the last 3-4 years. I think that's where our main focus is. And in terms of incorporation, if you're not incorporated yet, I think we do expect that you're moving towards that direction. Again, this is a slightly flexible rule. So we will not ask you for incorporation certificates or anything like that. That's essentially what this means. So because we are looking at young ventures, we didn't want to force the whole incorporation criteria. And of course, there are a few more eligibility criteria, such as like if any of you won the previous HSBC challenge, you're not eligible, but you can look at the whole list on our website. I think In terms of evaluation, we have 5 evaluation criteria, uh, which all of them have equal weightage. So not one of them is not more important than the other. And in addition to the criteria, we're also looking at DI focus in terms of the applications. The connection and commitment part of it, basically how affected by climate change are you personally, and how are you facing it firsthand, right? So that's the connection and commitment, and how are you able to sort of bring in your community in that context, right? So that's the connection and commitment part of the criteria. I think activating green change makers is something that we've already spoken about. Are you, apart from just delivering your solution, are you also helping others to become a part of this movement, right? So I think activating green change makers is that. Impact is mostly about the evidence that your solution does what it does. This is something that all grant applications and around the world ask. It's like, okay, you tell me you're doing this, but is it actually happening, right? So essentially, that's that kind of evidence. Even for a prototype, it's possible to create evidence like that. Innovation, again, there are 2 aspects to innovation here. I think one is, are you creating something new? Is it something path-breaking and new? Second is, are you taking something that's existing and applying it to a new context? I think, like I said, both of those are equally important, and that's what innovation is about. And also, under innovation, mindset shift is a big part of it, in terms of whether your solution is able to create mindset shift at scale, right? So that, I think, because of Ashoka's vision for mindset shift at scale, this becomes a very important and strategic evaluation criteria for us. I think operational viability is quite simple and straightforward. Here is, yes, you've started your venture, which is great. I think even taking the decision to start your venture itself is such a big one. But do you have the necessary partnerships, the people, the resources, including stuff like hiring, funding, and other types of support to be able to continue to do this, right? So because once you start something, people are sort of dependent on you. There's a community that gets formed around you. So are you able to continue to serve that community for a period of time, right? So that's what operational viability is. I know that I saw a few people asking if this is going to be shared. Yes, and this is also on the website. So either way, you'll have access to this. But I think we are going on to the strong application part of it, and I'm going to, okay, there's a couple more things before that. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to June to talk about the prize and benefits of this challenge.
Yes, thanks, Aravind. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I'll quickly take you through what's in it for you, why should you apply, and a little bit of the timeline, and then we can go into how to strengthen your application. But yeah, all of this information is on our website, but really what's in it for you is 4 key things, the way we see it. The first one, which all of you are going to get, are connections and a community. As an applicant to this challenge, you're automatically part of a community of Green Changemakers, which you can see a few people here already. You'll get a chance to build your network and connect with peers who are doing similar work across the world, across the eligible countries. You're going to get to interact and connect with peers. You also get learning and support because at every stage of this challenge, so as long as you apply, you're going to get feedback on your application. And as you progress through the stages, every time you get through a next stage, internal reviewers, so the team will leave feedback on your application, and both on your application and also beyond on your work. And you also get to give each other feedback. So that's also connected to the first point. Winners, so the 12 winners that we will select will also have a chance to go through a systems change journey, which will be facilitated by Ashoka, and that's a journey that we'll offer, which is another learning opportunity. As you all know, obviously you all get funding as well. The winners can get up to $25,000 and at least $15,000. We also have an early entry deadline, which is next Wednesday, the 29th. And there will be a top 3 winners from the early entry applicants, which will get $1,500. And of course, you get recognition. So as you go along this journey, you're also going to be celebrated on Ashoka networks. Winners will be specifically featured on our, and like showcased and uplifted through our platforms. So that's a little bit of what's in it for you. But I guess if you're here, you have some curiosity already. And yeah, a bit on the timeline, which you might already know, but we've launched on the 1st of March. The early entry deadline is next Wednesday, March 29th at 5 p.m. UTC. So every deadline is at 5 p.m. UTC Universal Time. The final deadline for applying is the 26th of April. Now, if you apply during the early entry, it doesn't mean you don't get the extra time. It just means you get feedback after having applied for early entry that you can sort of use to refine your application before the 26th of April. Then between the 26th and the 31st, you'll just have to sit back while we review your application and select the semifinalists and provide that feedback. There will be about 2 weeks for semifinalists to refine their applications until June 12th, and then we will shortlist the finalists by July 5th, and then we will announce the winners in August of 2023, after which all of these winners will go through an engagement with Ashoka and HSBC, which will include a journey around systems change. And yeah, so that's a little bit about what to expect next. I'm going to quickly run through some slides around, well, I'm not going to run through them, actually. I'm going to just skip through them. You're going to get this deck afterwards, but that's sort of answering the question of like, how can you technically apply? So there's a few screenshots here with the steps on how to apply. You can look at this later on. But here we get to the juicy part. What makes a strong application? So we've taken you through the whole framing of our challenge, how we view green change making, what our focus areas and evaluation criteria are. And we were thinking of taking you a little bit through how you can make your application strong based on this knowledge. So here's a bit of a checklist for you. As you're thinking of applying, green check marks you must have. So you must be eligible. You must respond to every single one of the eligibility criteria, including being registered or in the process of registering. Sorry, there's a mistake here, but you have to be registered or plan to register in an eligible country. You have to be early or mid-stage, so under 6 years. You cannot be older than, the organization cannot be older than 6 years. And you have to fit within all the other eligibility criteria. So, you have to have at least a minimum viable product. You have to be 18 years old, etc. You also have to answer to our framing question. So that is a little bit what we've been presenting, right? What is our framing in general? It sort of, you have to, sorry, I was admitting people. You have to answer the question of how might we, so how are you equipping every person with the mindset and capability to contribute towards a sustainable world where no one is left behind and everyone can thrive. So your work must fit within this question. Your work must answer this question in a way. Now, for the focus areas and the evaluation criteria, this is where you have to evaluate on yourself whether you are fitting or not. So you must at least fit within one of our focus areas. So do you create inclusive pathways for people to contribute? Do you turn data and information into stories that spark actions? Or do you create structures of support for existing solutions? So many of you often, if you're very strongly aligned with one of the focus areas, it's possible that you are aligned across focus areas, and that's totally fine. And we're happy to receive applications of people who are in all 3 focus areas, but you need to strongly resonate with at least one of them. So you might just be creating pathways for people to contribute, allowing and creating those inclusive ways for people to be part of the conversation and to be part of green change making, but you might not be doing so much around data and information into stories, and that's fine. But yeah, that's like an important checklist for you to go through. And of course, the evaluation criteria, that's what you're going to be evaluated on. That's what we're going to score you on, which are, do you have a strong commitment and connection to the problem? Are you activating other green change makers? Is your approach making a visible impact towards a zero carbon world? Is it innovative? Do you have a viable model? All of that. And so, yeah, that's sort of the main thing to remember on this slide is that green check marks you must have, focus areas, you must have at least one of those, and evaluation criteria, you have to evaluate on yourself whether you're strong or not on them, but make sure that your application is highlighting those 5 points, because those are the most important things. Now we're going to give you a couple of examples of innovations or solutions that we think are highly fitting for this challenge. Now, for one reason or another, they're actually not eligible. We wanted to make sure that we didn't pick somebody that would be eligible to apply, but it might help you think through, and we wanted to show you what our reasoning would be when looking at applications. So, it's freezing. There we go. So the first example is Arctic Aider Society. And what they do is they center Indigenous knowledge in climate action. I'm not going to read through all of the work that they do, but really it's a social networking application which is built by and for the Inuit communities. And so they connect Inuit communities across remote geographies as they map sort of the way climate change has been is sort of manifesting itself around their environments. And it allows for sharing knowledge as well as applying knowledge and because they are the most embedded in their community, so they know best. And I just wanted to take you through a little bit sort of how we would think about this organization. So first of all, we see that this organization would fall under the focus area of creating inclusive pathways for people to contribute. You would also say that it falls under the other two focus areas, but the most highlighted one is this one, because they're giving a space in the conversation to a community that is really, really close to the problem because they live within this nature. And it is elevating and centering their voices and knowledge because it's sort of translating oral culture into actual valuable scientific data and evidence on environmental change. Now there's about 3 evaluation criteria that they specifically stand out in. So the first one is connection and commitment. Because this whole organization is built for Inuits by Inuits, it has a strong community involvement and participation. It also activates Green Changemakers because it's by nature, this organization is allowing and equipping the community members to be Green Changemakers. They're holding the knowledge, they're leading the conversation. And through that, it's also giving them tools to make more informed decisions when they're taking care of their lands. And impact. So if you read a bit more about them, they have about 4,000 users across the Arctic with an average of 290 posts per month. Now, this is a lot. We don't expect you to have such a wide impact. Again, they are not eligible, but it's just sort of an idea that we want to see sort of how, that your work is working basically. And the model is highly aligned with our work. Another organization that we wanted to highlight is 2811, which is an organization that is originally based in Chile, but sort of their work is strengthening ecosystems of innovation and social entrepreneurship. And their work falls more under the focus area of creating structures of support for existing solutions. So that third focus area that we're talking about. And that's because their whole model is based around the idea that people and organizations need to have the tools to be agents of change. So their approach is very holistic in the way they approach climate change. They work on projects that aim to rebuild the environment, and they focus on ecological and social and economic aspects. And as you may guess, they fare very well in the evaluation criteria of activating Green Changemakers because they have this belief in activating the ecosystem and enabling people to achieve their full potential as change makers. And they do that through connections and capacity building, but also in innovation, because their approach is bringing a whole new perspective into the conversation. So they're not just connecting people with each other and building capacity, they're also putting a lot of emphasis on the importance of a regenerative approach, which is something that is very important to us, as Aravind explained earlier, because they're activating solutions that aren't just, let's contain the damage that the planet is already receiving, but let's actually regenerate ecosystems. And that's how they're leading the ecosystem that they're building. They have a perspective of sort of oneness with nature, because they understand that we're not just interacting with nature, but we are actually nature as humans. And so they would really, their vision is highly innovative in the way that they're approaching it. And they do that by creating structures of support for existing solutions. Now, I know this was a lot. All of this deck is going to be sent out to you, including the checklist, including those examples and why they're strong examples. But I believe it's time to open it up to questions because you're probably filled with them at the moment. So yeah, Aravind, go ahead.
Yep, I think it's definitely for all four of us here to answer. But I think one trend of questions that I'm seeing in the chat is around the whole the years the solution or the venture has been active, right? So I think it's probably important to clarify that since a lot of you all are asking about it, right? So now I think there are two scenarios, right? One, I think one of the examples that we saw in the chat was you were a nonprofit organization and then you shut down that business and then you started as a for-profit social enterprise, right? So the for-profit social enterprise becomes a new entity from that point in time. So whatever time that you calculate sort of starts from that point, right? Then the second scenario is you've as a solution or as an individual, you've never incorporated at all, right? Which is totally fine. I think we are completely flexible on the fact that you're not currently incorporated. Now, there's a third scenario. You've incorporated long ago, and the solution that you are developing is within that enterprise, right? Let's say I started my company in 2015, right? And then in 2020, I'm starting a new product or a new service or whatever that is, a new solution, let's call it that. But it's within the scope of that organization. The solution would not exist without that organization, right? So in this scenario, you wouldn't be eligible because the organization itself is about 7 years old, right? So I think these three scenarios are generally what we see, and hopefully this clarifies. And June, Ria, Jirida, correct me if I'm wrong about how I explained these three scenarios. Cool. Does that make sense? And you feel free to unmute and ask, like, if you have more questions. I think now that we've stopped taking you through content, you can unmute and ask. It can be a discussion. We're open to going a few minutes above the said time as well if people have more questions.
Hello.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Arvind.
Hannah? Okay, cool. Yeah, tell me.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, so I have a question based on the answer you just gave us just now. So for instance, our organization, Sustain Vibes, were founded in 2016, just like a community of young people, but we weren't registered until 2018. And we started like full operations then. So are we still qualified? Are we still eligible? Can we still apply?
Yeah, I think in that particular scenario, since you registered, I think that's why we've kept it a little flexible, because it's possible that a lot of us start our ventures much before we register. We are sort of in this place where we are sort of ideating and then we register maybe 2 years later. Since the year of your registration is 2018, and that falls under the 6-year line that we have, that works. Does that answer your question?
Sure. That means we can still apply. Thank you.
Yes, and happy to, I think if you want to clarify more, feel free to write to us. I think one of the questions that was there was, where can we write to? I can put the email ID in the chat. It's greenchangemakers@ashoka.org. I think we usually respond in a couple of days. I see Kripa's hand up. Kripa, do you want to unmute and ask?
Thank you. I did put my question in the chat, but it's just easier to talk, so I'll ask it anyway. My organization it's informal, it's fairly new. We're in the process of looking to incorporate. So when With regards to the operational viability, I assume that you would consider the context. So if I'm really new, I'm at an early stage, I'm speaking with potential partners, looking for seed funding, so on. So what is the expectation for an organization like mine?
Do one of you want to take it? I'm not exactly sure on this.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. And obviously, team, you can feel free to jump in. The way I view it is, and that's why we called it operational viability, right? Because we are looking for we're open to early stage applications. We understand that you might not have, your funding secured and, a sustainable funding model for the next 10 years. But we want to be able to see a plan, not a plan. We're not going to ask you for like your business plan. That's not something that we want to see, but we want to, we need to be able to see that your organization has a model that is sustainable. Whether you're still seeking seed funding, but you have sort of an idea of once you get that seed funding, this is what's going to happen. Like this is sort of the sustainable model that would allow your organization to stay, to survive beyond 6 months or a year. But yeah, we don't need you to have, we're not going to ask you for your business model or your business plan, but we need to sort of be able to see that you have an idea of how it's going to work, even once you get that seed funding, or worse, once you get through multiple rounds of seed funding. But yeah, it's sort of being able to show us that it's possible, and that you know what it's going to look like once you get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so if I talk about our sort of projected budget and the bits, the various cost heads where we are looking to fund for this year, would that suffice?
Yeah, but then again, we don't need to be able to see your projected budget, and it's operational viability, not just financial viability. So it also means, you're going to have a team, you're going to partner with people. This is what the resources you're going to use. So we don't need to see everything, especially like, I mean, if you feel free to share, if you feel like it's going to help us evaluate you on that criteria, you can share whatever you want, but that's not necessarily what we're looking for. It's really just being able to see that you've got a plan for all the resources, which include funding, but which include everything else as well.
That makes sense. Thank you. And can I sneak in one more question while I have the floor? If you could at some stage elaborate on the feedback that early applicants get. Is this through email, and are you able to offer detailed support on the application? Again, very new, so it's one of the first applications I'm doing. Thank you.
I can take that one to Arvind if you want. Yes, you will get feedback via email. When by the time you submit on if you've submitted your application by the 29th at 5 p.m. UTC, you will get feedback about 10 days later via email, which will give you a few weeks to apply that feedback into your application if you choose to. And yes, it will really be sort of like, this is a strong application because of X, Y, Z, but these are also some points that you can improve, or I would like to see more of this and this and this. So we'll have a team of reviewers that will be doing the feedback. Was there a second part to your question?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome.
Abner, I see hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right.
You're free to pronounce whatever
Go ahead.
you want to. First of all, thank you for this, and congratulations as well for being able to hold space and like offer opportunities for Changemakers. I lead a multi-arts collective, and there are different projects that we have done before, but the collective is fairly new. It has transformed into a collective, sort of. But anyway, I want to ask about, is it possible to take inspiration from one project that we have done before successfully, and maybe like, transform it, develop it, grow it, or is it actually better to pitch a new concept, because would there be like a conflict of interest if that previous project was funded by something else? And so that's one question that I want to ask. And then second, like in terms of creating a projected budget, which I'm getting from June, like you may not necessarily have to go into the details of it, but can you give a frame of the budget that we're talking if we're gonna pitch a project, just so we can be realistic? I mean, I want to make sure that in the proposal, I I manage my expectations well. Like, okay, this is the budget that I'm working, so I could work on a nationwide scale, or I could work only on a local scale for this particular solution. So I think that's the second, and then the third is like your metrics for evaluation, like documentation, archiving, or whatsoever. How do you gauge the success of the project, or how do you want us to document the project or report the project? Thank you.
I think I can talk to the first question. June, I'll let you take the other two. I think the first question was about whether you want to sort of apply with something new, completely new, right? Something you've probably not even delivered on the ground, versus something that's been active for a little while, right? So I think, in my opinion, I think yes, idea stage is probably slightly earlier than what we are looking for. I think we're looking at early stage and mid stage. So early stage would essentially mean that the idea itself has seen some kind of fruition, either as a prototype or a pilot or something. So
yeah, so it's actually an advantage. Yeah, so it's an advantage that the project has been tested before. Okay, great.
Yeah, so yeah, it is an advantage. So if I were you, I would totally apply with the project that's already been tested in the real world. Yeah. June, do you want to take the other two questions?
I had a bit of a clarification question, I guess, in the sense that in order to be eligible to apply, you must have implemented already. One of our eligibility criteria is that you must have implemented, you must have a prototype or an MVP of some sort, because one of our evaluation criteria is impact. We need to see that you've had created impact already. So your other question was around what budget
detailed what's the frame of, you mentioned like the winners could get like 25 or at least 15. So are we thinking like the frame of the projected budget, that because at the end of the day we have to do the projected budget as an organization, we have to manage the resources well, and manage the expectations of what are we getting from Ashoka, for instance. So I'm just like thinking, should I work on a local scale for this, or a really wide scale? But it's gonna depend on what's the range of what we can receive as possible grantees, for instance. That's one. And the third is the metrics of your evaluation. What are you expecting of us to report, or the manner of reporting, documentation, archiving, and all sorts. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the budget, we don't, the money that we give you is gonna be like, if you're a winner, basically, and it's all outlined sort of on our website, but I can explain it now. We have divided the eligible countries into 4 geographical categories, and we are going to select at least 2 winners from each of these specific categories.
Okay.
At least 2. So it's up to 12 winners in total. So it's going to vary, but 4 of the 12 winners are going to get $25,000. And then the rest will probably, like, it might vary a little bit depending on the amount of winners that we get, but you can get up to $25,000 and we'll get at least $15,000. Now that's going to be part of the reviewing process and the judges' deliberations as to how much the winners get, because it's going to be about selecting winners and also about assigning prizes to the winners.
I see. So it's gonna be coming from your end, like this is the budget that we're providing for your pitch, or for your, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the application process is the same for everyone, and then based on the evaluation criteria and based on the deliberations and the whole sort of challenge journey, prizes get assigned at the end. So the 12 winners get selected, and then prizes get assigned to the winners. Up to 12 winners. It might vary a little bit. Does that sort of answer your question? But that
Yes,
is again,
yes. I think I just needed to know because like some grants basically we already like articulate, for instance, what's the budget like that we need. But in this case, you are gonna evaluate it and you're gonna like either put us into the 2,500 category or the 1,500 or the 15,000. So that's great. The one last is the evaluation. That would be very helpful too. So that we could project it. Yeah.
Yeah, so and maybe Ria, you can jump in if there's any sort of like HSBC side information. But on our side, the way we follow up as if you are a winner and if you do receive like if you as a winner you would receive a financial award. The follow-up we will do is about how you've used your money. But on the Ashoka side of things, we will not be sort of asking any sort of particular, like we won't require you to spend it on anything in particular, as long as you're spending it in the on the organization that you've applied with, basically. The money is here to advance your work, to uplift your impact. And so the follow-up that we will do is just to understand how that money has allowed you to create more impact and to see what the impact you've created with that money. But yeah, sort of that's the follow-up that we will do.
Thank you so much.
I can jump in there really quickly, because this is where the part that Arvind mentioned about commitment and connection to the cause becomes a big criteria. We are looking at these applications as a reflection of your commitment as individuals to the cause, and the funding and the sort of winning, like the winners, is the challenges faith in you as individuals. So in that sense, there is, like June says, not as much monitoring of what exactly the funding goes into after, although we will be following up to understand impact, to understand depth and scale of impact and how that's been used. But really, we are looking for individuals that are truly committed and connected to the cause, and where your application strongly believes reflects like sort of the fact that you will continue to be in the field of green change making and solution building and activating green change makers. And that is where really the funding is going in the individual.
I love that.
Helps.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. That's great.
Christopher, sorry, you've had your hand up for a while, but please unmute yourself and ask us.
All right, thank you very much. I want to thank Ashoka for the opportunity. This is really awesome. So my question would be around the storytelling part. I was listening to you, Arvind, around the issue of eligibility, and you talked about the 3 focal areas, and mine and that of my organization is for the storytelling. I'm reaching out from Nigeria, and recently there is this yearning for people to get into the entire process of environmental sustainability, and the talk is beginning to grow. But at the end of the day, we don't have much people telling the story. So I'm a media practitioner, a broadcast journalist for about 10 years, but my organization is about 6 years. Now, we want to drive into content creation for green economy, sustainability, better environment. So I'm a little bit, my strength for the participation is becoming weak when I heard about the processes, but I think storytelling is very key, and it was captured in the entire eligibility criteria when I read it. So I want you to shed more light for content creators in terms of sensitizing, especially the locals. What are the opportunities for such people like us in this green challenge, Changemakers challenge? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christopher. Obviously, I think the way you put it shows that you obviously have a lot of passion for what you do. But directly answering your question, I think when it comes to the storytelling, content creators are obviously a big part of it, and content itself is one part of storytelling, right? It's not storytelling. I think if you look at that particular criteria, what it would say is using stories and data, right? I think it's like a mix of emotions and rationale and all of that, right? But the main focus of it is how does it do either one of two things, right? One, the story should either lead to somebody taking action, getting inspired and taking action, which is the whole activating change makers part of it, or it can also lead to a shift in mindset in which how they view nature or how they view humanity's role within nature, right? So while content is great, content creators are very important. I think at the end of the day, within the scope of Green Changemakers, they would have to do one of these two things for it to be a strong application for this grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great. Pooja, I see your hand was up for a while as well. Go for
Thank
it.
you. So basically, my org has several different programs. Like the mission is to accelerate access to the climate movement for young people and strengthen intergenerational power sharing. And so within that, there's several programs like doing research on the status of youth and people of color on boards of environmental orgs, and then trying to get them on boards and advisory councils. Then we've got like a search engine where you can look for jobs, opportunities near you, a podcast for storytelling, and some other programs. And so I guess my question is, if we have something where we have several different programs, should we just pick one, or should we present the org as a whole in what it's trying to accomplish?
I can quickly answer that, and because it's kind of an open-ended question, I'll also let my teammates sort of come in. But I would say if these different initiatives or programs are sort of heavily aligned and then they sort of feed into each other, I think the way that you've described, I'm assuming that's the case. If that is the case and you're able to sort of fit into the rest of the criteria, then it makes for a more powerful story. Basically, you're sort of saying that, hey, this feeds into this and therefore this happens, right? And that is a framework that we generally use at Ashoka as well. Like, okay, we do all of these 5 things and therefore it leads to this 1 or 2 outcomes, right? So I would say if, yeah, I think if they feed into each other and they are sort of integrated, yes, it makes sense to apply along with the whole story and not just part of it.
Thank you.
Cool. I think it's possible that we probably missed some questions in the chats. I'm not exactly sure. I also want to be mindful of time. I know that we asked you for about an hour, and that's about 4 minutes from now. But we are happy to the core team, the 4 of us who are here. We are happy to go a few minutes over. If anybody has more questions, we are happy to stay and answer. But the rest of y'all, feel free to go have your day back if you want to, or you can choose to stay and listen in on other people's questions. But Hannah, I see your question, not your question, but I see your hand up again. Go for it.
All right, Harvey, thank you so much. So I have a question around the, this idea stage thing. So we as an organization, we already have a, how do I put this now? We have a model, and we've been doing this for a while now, and with so much impact. However, we're looking at the tech side of what we are doing, and it's quite novel. Do you understand? So it's something that we've not really exactly explored so much. So this is like the tech innovation aspect. So do you now, are you still saying that it's not going to count because it's still in the idea stage?
I think that's a good question, and sorry, I'm jumping in. I think I feel like I have the answer on top of my head, but I think when it comes to tech, I think that's what you meant. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you meant was you have a tech solution and it's in the idea stage right now, and for tech to become viable, and because you're talking about viability and impact, I think those are the 2 main concerns about an idea stage application, right? Because the other stuff can sort of check, but how do I as a reviewer, let's say I was reviewing an application or someone else, and then there is idea stage, and then the question is about impact and operational viability, then it becomes much harder to do it. That said, if you I think there are some weeks left, so it is possible for you to sort of edit your application until the end. So if you can create prototypes and have them tested, prototype testing, I think there is something called a low fidelity testing that you can do, where you can create something very, very simple and have people sort of test it, right? And we do this at Ashoka as well, right? Where to take something to the team, we actually do a low fidelity and then we take it to the team. So I think especially with tech, those two are the concerns. And if you can do a low fidelity testing, that can still make your application a strong one, right? But without that, it will be much harder for the reviewer to be like, okay, I'm not really seeing it, right? There needs to be some kind of a visual element to it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. I get that. So you mean that we should just go ahead and, test. So, the early deadline is now, and we're looking at submitting, before next week.
Yeah.
So can we still do that after submission?
Yes.
Well,
So just to clarify on that, maybe I cut you off. Sorry about that. Just to clarify on that, you can edit your application, revise your application any number of times from now until the final deadline, which is April 26th, right? Yeah, April 26th, you can revise your applications any number of times. The only advantage of applying for the early entry deadline, not the only, but one of the main advantages is that you will get an additional round of feedback, right? So yeah, you will get an additional round of feedback, which doesn't mean that it will make you ineligible.
Hello, I connection. I lost you for a while, so I just joined in.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so as I was saying, you can revise your application any number of times between now and the final entry deadline, which is April 26th. The advantage of applying for the early entry deadline is that you will get an additional round of feedback on your project, right? Which you could use to revise. But that doesn't mean that if you do not win the early entry prize, you cannot win the final prize, and vice versa, right? Just because you win the early entry prize doesn't mean that you would win the final prize. So I think it goes both ways, but you have the option of submitting now and still revising it later as you get more information.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
And sorry, Arvind, if I can quickly jump in and add something to what you were saying around, because we've had a few questions around idea stage application, and I just want to clarify that yes, there's the two evaluation criteria around impact and viability, but most importantly, like we will not evaluate ineligible applications. So if you look at the application form, there's the eligibility criteria, and one of them is to say, yes, I have implemented and I have a prototype and I have a minimum viable product, and we will be checking through the applications. And so even if you mark yes, and then we realize that you've not implemented anything, we cannot review your application just because of fairness, because we've said that's ineligible. So yeah, just to know, like, it's not just about the evaluation, it is that we unfortunately cannot review applications that have not been implemented. Ineligible applications will just receive an email a few days later saying, sorry, you're not eligible. Yeah, just wanted to clarify that as well.
Marianne, I'm sorry if I'm absolutely
sorry,
your name out.
Yeah, hi. This is Louis from Urban Farmers, Philippines. I'm not sure if it was discussed. What kind of format are you expecting when we send the application? Is there a format? Is there a video? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it, what is it? What are we expecting?
So the application is actually a questionnaire. Jarida here designed that questionnaire. I'll let her add more if she wants to. But essentially, the questionnaire has various fields that lets you mostly talk about it in written text format. You have to explain it as a story. But there are places where you can add links, upload documents. So I would say, to answer your question directly, it's mostly written, but you can add additional files like videos and links to websites or YouTube videos to whatever helps someone understand your story and your venture, right? So hopefully the fields in the questionnaire would sort of take care of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, is there a specific link for the presentation or anything?
That I am actually not sure about that. June, Jarida?
No, there really isn't. Okay, there are, like, for some of the questions we have, okay, we want your story to come out as clear as possible in the shortest version, shortest version you can write, right? So what I would advise is approach these almost, I don't like using interview, but approach it almost as an interview, right? So for each, because now June has taken, oh, actually it's Aravind. Aravind took us through the evaluation criteria. Ask yourself, are you answering each evaluation criteria? How are you talking about your commitment and connection? How are you talking about activating other green change makers, and so on and so forth? So for each question, there is it's almost a hint of how you can answer it. So you have questions that are telling you, so like for activating green change makers, you ask yourself, like, how are you doing it? How are you helping other people identify their strengths as green change makers? Are you creating green change makers, right? So for each, then if the answer is yes, what you do is say how are you doing that? So by going through the evaluation criteria, we will be able to see how you are answering each question. So just think of it as an interview, like putting your best foot forward. How are you communicating this? So yes, one, you can add, I think you can add links. However, the primary way for submitting your application will be written. So just go to the link that June has shared on the chat right now. When you click on apply and add your project, you will have those prompts, and just answer each and every one through the simple prompts that have been given, and yeah, you'll be able to submit your application.
Yeah, just for some, for example, when if it's like an interview, like, can we send a video for the answer? Or it has
If
to
I
be
can-
written?
So I'll jump in. So if you look at the application form, once you open the link, which I can re-share in the chat because somebody just asked, once you open the application form, it will be clearer, but there are questions with text responses and there's character limits to each question. So there is a bit of flexibility at the end to like add certain things if you would like. But as Jadida said, the application form was very intentionally designed to get the information that we're looking for, because these are the questions that we need answered from you. Now that you know the evaluation criteria, that you know what we're looking for, if there is anything that you think is really, really valuable that you've not managed to give us because of the application form, but that you think would be really valuable for us and that would strengthen your application against the specific evaluation criteria we've given you, then yes, submit it. But try to do your best to really just answer the questions, because this is the information we're looking for from you. So we would rather you're concise and give us the information that we need, rather than just invade us with thousands of links and photos and
maybe
videos,
just
if that
too
makes
much
sense.
information might not be good.
Yeah. So really, unless you think that if you think there's a certain video or a certain article that you're like, this will really strengthen my application against what they're looking for, and I was not able to express it before, yes, please share it. but otherwise it's mostly just, it's been designed in a way for you to give us, for us to sort of understand your story in the way that we're going to be evaluating it as well.
All right, I think it's clear. Thank you very much.
Hello. So it seems like I'm asking so much question, but I just need to like confirm something that June said. So while you were answering or you were adding to the my last question, I didn't get you. I didn't get the first part because I was disconnected. So I want to confirm. You said that if someone sends an application and the application does not meet your criteria, even though the person sends before the person sends at the first deadline, you won't send a feedback, right?
June, do you
Yes,
wanna,
if it's not eligible, if it's not eligible, not if it doesn't fit the evaluation criteria. The evaluation is different. As long as you're eligible, we will send you feedback. Even if you have nothing to do with our evaluation criteria and you're completely not aligned, if you're eligible, we will send you feedback. We will tell you, this is where I would have improved your application. This is where I wouldn't have, like, we will give you the feedback based on this, on the context of this challenge, but that is only if you're eligible. So if it's a person who's applying, it's an organization that's from a non-eligible country, like Spain, for example, or if it's like an organization that's 12 years old, we are simply not able to evaluate it. Does that answer your question?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Great, we don't see any active. This is the link of adding a project. That's right. That's right. I think once you log in, you should be able to access the whole interface. And I think if you have any questions at any point, if you're stuck, I think the email ID is where we are reachable, and we do have a tech team to sort of fix any kind of, or help you manage any kind of issues that you're facing. So yes, the link that you've shared up there is the right one. Yes, we will share this deck on the email as well. Cool. So looks like, I think we've been here for a while, and I think we are past injury time as well, if, as they say in football, soccer, I suppose, in some places. So for the ones who are still here, thank you, and we will be closing this call now. And if you want to get in touch with us, do write to us at greenchangemakers@ashoka.org. We will be following up with an email with the presentation as well as the recording. So until next time, all the best for your application, and have a good day and a good weekend.
Thank you everyone for joining. Bye.